A new USA Today Suffolk University poll shows Vance trailing Congressman Ryan by 1 point. That's within the poll's margin of error, but shows just how competitive this race is in a state that Donald Trump won pretty easily 2 times. We've got Congressman Tim Ryan with us now. Talk about those people. Nice scene. You've got the Jason Sudeikis car cam working for you today. We thank you for coming to us, even though you're in the middle of campaigning, I know. Talk about really quickly those people that have funded his campaign, that funded him in the primary, the Silicon Valley Titans that he said he loved, and the area that he said he loved until he decided to become a politician.
Yeah. So, Peter Thiel obviously gave him $15 million for the primary. The guy got 2 donors, Joe. Peter Thiel gave him $15 million in the primary. And then Mitch McConnell came in with $30 million. All of this money that Mitch McConnell got are the very people who offshored the jobs in Ohio, who made money off of NAFTA and all of these big trade deals that really led to the disinvestment, the job loss, the heartache, the opiate addiction here in Ohio. That's the money that Mitch McConnell's using to try to buy the Senate seat here in Ohio. And we have 250,000 low dollar donors. People can go to timforoh.com to help us out. But we got low dollar donors trying to combat this thing. And we're winning, by a point or 2 here or there. But I think we're going to win it because he's so disconnected. You guys ran the piece about the Ohio State game. The guy is a complete fraud, started an opiate charity. Who starts a fake opiate charity to prey on people in Ohio? J.D. Vance does.
Yeah, so talk about, there's a question, where is J.D. Vance? Doesn't seem to be really campaigning that much. Do you get a sense that, no, I'm serious. Listen, I know. I'll just talk, me and you, talk politician to politician, former House member to former House member. People would always ask me, how do you do that? How do you knock on people's doors all day? How do you go in and talk to them, have dinner with them? I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I considered it an honor when people would let me in their homes to talk about what mattered the most to them. I know you're the same way, but this guy that you're running against, he doesn't seem to even like this. And by the way, it's not just media people telling this. Top Republican donors are saying he's the worst candidate they've ever seen in his life. He hates being out there. He shouts at people in meetings. Like, what's his deal, man? What's part of his deal?
I'm not going to lay him down on the couch here and analyze him. I'm not exactly sure. All I know is that there's one primary value that we have in Ohio. Whether you're rich or poor, you're middle class, you better be out there grinding. In Ohio, we value hard work more than anything else. Some people are smarter than others, but everybody is expected to work hard. And those are the values. That's how we were raised in Ohio. And it's a complete slap in the face. The dude took the whole summer off. I mean, who doesn't want to take the whole summer off? Everybody does. Single moms with a couple of kids. You're working. I travel to the state. I meet factory workers working 6-7 days a week, busting their rear ends for their kids, for their family. And you got someone running for the Senate here who took the entire summer off, who wants to do 1 or maybe 2 events a day on a busy day, and we're grinding with 5-6 events a day, starting early morning like this today. So the reality is he's not going to get rewarded. We just need the resources necessary to keep that. You saw the ad. My guys at Left Hook are doing a great job with our ads. And we're getting out there, and people don't like him. We just gotta keep the heat on him. But I just don't think he likes people. I think he wants to be called senator one day. You've done this long enough, Joe. There's some people who want to get in there and grind it and help people, and there's some people that just want the title. And he's just a guy that wants the title, and he's a fraud.
Congressman, to your point about how people feel about you and feel about him, J.D. Vance in the state of Ohio, there's that part of that poll that we showed that has you effectively tied, gets into favorability. You are 46 favorable, 26 unfavorable. He's 42 favorable, 43. So you're plus 17 in that unfavorable. So I guess that leads me to a question of your message to Republicans in the state of Ohio. There are people who say, well, Ohio's gone red now, right? They went plus 7 or 8 or whatever it was for Donald Trump. What is your message to Ohio Republicans in this general election who may look at J.D. Vance and say, I don't like the way he's running the campaign, maybe I don't like the guy, and are giving you a look?
Well, I would say, one, I'm one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. The last 2 Congresses, I've been in the top 10% of most bipartisan. I want to work across the aisle. Look, the Democrats aren't right on everything, and I'm willing to sit down and have conversations about how we can move out of this age of stupidity and into an age of reconciliation and reform. How do we fix all of these broken systems? Some of those answers will come from Republicans. It's not the extremists that we're dealing with every single day. We've got to kill and confront that movement. But working with normal mainstream Republicans, I think that's going to be really, really important, because we have to reform these systems. And I will tell them, too, we got to get the government out of our business. I'm all in on that. You see the Dobbs decision. You see, in Florida, where they're trying to punish businesses. J.D. Vance is all in on that, punishing businesses because they don't necessarily have the business culture that these ideologues want them to have, government overreach into the private lives of our citizens, like with the Dobbs decision, getting rid of birth control, talking about nullifying marriages. That is way too much government in our business. And I'm down with that. And I think it's important for us also to dominate the industries of the future. That means infrastructure, that means research. And we have to talk about the fact that just spending money does not solve problems. We have broken systems, so we've got to fix these systems. I think that's going to be an era of reform that I would love to lead and be a part of. And I think it's important for this country as we come out of the pandemic. So I'm saying exhausted majority, Democrats, Republicans, and independents against the extremists, leading an era of reform and reconciliation so we can heal this country and move into the future. And again, I don't have $1 billion donor here to fund me. I need the low dollar people who can go to timforoh.com and chip in a couple of bucks and help us put this extremist movement to bed so we can move on with being Americans again.
Hey, 2 quick questions, and we actually have some other stories we have to go to, but one of them has to do with growing concerns about a police shortage. I have asked Democrats on this show before about defunding the police, and everyone that comes on is against defunding the police, though some are not as supportive of our men and women in law enforcement as a voter. I personally would want them to be, some Democrats. And so I want to ask you, the question about law enforcement. Of course, you've got crazy, extreme Republicans in the House calling for the defunding of the FBI. But do you understand? Do you understand as a Democrat that people are leaving law enforcement because they don't think that elected officials have their back, that they will see what the 5% do, the 3% do, the 1% do, that get picked up on cell phones and repeated on TV 1,000 times. But the 99% who are kissing their kids on the forehead goodnight, hugging their wives or their husbands goodbye, and going off and risking their lives at night, protecting us, that those people just don't feel like politicians have their back anymore, so they're quitting. Do you understand that? Do you understand that crisis? And do you understand that law enforcement officers across America need all of our support?
1,000%, Joe. And that's one of the frustrating things. You saw one of the TVs in the ad had that, defund the police on the screen when I threw the football at it, because we want to be very, very clear. That doesn't make any sense. That's crazy. People need help, especially with what's going on in some of our cities. They want to pick up the phone and call someone to come help them with a really, really bad situation. And those people in those jobs are, as you said, they have kids, they have spouses. It's a dangerous job. I did a ride along a month or 2 back just outside of Dayton. And anytime you pull somebody over at night, it's scary. You never know, especially in Ohio when you can have everybody can have a gun in their car. We need more cops. We need better paid cops. And we need to get rid of bad cops. I think that's a pretty simple thing that 95% of Americans would agree with. If you've done something wrong, if you're doing something wrong, you should be out and prosecuted. But I have cops in my district, Joe. They make $14 an hour to start. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, so we've got, and that's why we put money into the rescue package for state and local government so that they could beef up, some of the law enforcement on the ground. That's why I've brought back almost $500 million to Ohio to fund cops and technology and the equipment they would need, because you have to make sure that these communities are safe. And again, J.D. Vance, he wants to abolish the ATF, which helps these cops solve crimes and prevent drug and gun crimes. He wants he wants nothing to do with the FBI. He's running around with Marjorie Taylor Greene and these other people who want to punish FBI agents who keep us safe. It's crazy. And that's what I mean when I say exhausted majority, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Bring back some freaking sanity to the country so that we can move forward and outcompete China. It's got to be a united effort.